from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefanía Bravo. This is From the South. Thousands of people are marching in Quito to protest against the policies and actions of the Ecuadorian president, Lenín Moreno. A variety of social and political movements called for the protest. They're expressing indignation at the government's decision to hand over Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, to the police in Britain. But they are also protesting against what they say is the president's persecution of his opponents and his austerity policies. The parents of a Swedish computer programmer detained in Ecuador on suspicion of criminal hacking are declaring his innocence. Olavini, who has ties to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, was arrested a mere hours after Ecuador revoked Assange's asylum in the nation's London embassy last Thursday. Our correspondent Denise Herrera in Quito has the details.
Prosecutors have said they intend to charge Olavini with hacking-related crimes and have ordered him detained for up to 90 days while they compile evidence. However, D'Augusta Fons and Gordel Bini say their son's rights are being violated. They say he has not committed any crime and so should be free.
We also want to ask authorities in Ecuador to release him, as we are certain that he is innocent of what he is being accused of. We want to plead also to Swedish authorities and politicians to help us as much as they can with this. We ask for your help to spread the word and build support for Ola.
Bini's attorney is also rejecting charges pending against his client, while he says the 36-year-old Swedish programmer is in good health at this time. He still does not understand why he has been accused of helping hack computer systems. The attorney says Bini did have a relationship with Assange, but he had no involvement with WikiLeaks.
The only link between my client and Julian Assange is friendship, because they work in computer development. He has no links to WikiLeaks. He has never worked for or with WikiLeaks. All he had was a personal bond of friendship with Assange.
Ecuador said on Monday it has suffered 40 million cyber attacks on the web pages of public institutions since stripping WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange of political asylum.
On April 11th, Ecuador went from the 51st to 31st in the world in terms of statistics showing the volume of cyber attacks.
Meanwhile, groups in defense of the protection of free software and digital activity in Ecuador and around the world have strongly condemned Bini's arrest. They say due process was not followed.
It is worrying that due process has been violated. It is public knowledge that the lawyers did not have access to their client. The airport is not the right place to arrest someone. They should have taken him to the detention center the same day. Obviously, there are problems with the way things were handled by the authorities.
Bini's relatives also say they do know former Foreign Minister Ricardo Patiño, who has been linked to this case by the current Interior Minister Maria Paula Romo. Romo claimed to be in possession of flight records which allegedly show that Bini and Patiño were on the same flights. In light of this, the Attorney General's office has asked for a new hearing for Patiño. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
Venezuela's ambassador to the United Nations, Samuel Moncada, has strongly criticized the financial aggression against Venezuela. He called for an international meeting between countries who suffer from similar sanctions.
These coercive measures or unilateral sanctions are currently being applied to more than 40 countries. They are illegal measures, not backed by the United Nations. We should host a big international conference between these 40 or so countries here at the United Nations or wherever, to resist this kind of financial aggression internationally. This is a new sort of weapon, which the International Monetary Fund doesn't recognize, even though it definitely should.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has also condemned new unilateral sanctions imposed on Venezuela by Canada. On Twitter, Arreaza said the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela categorically rejects the illegal application of new unilateral coercive measures that the government of Canada has adopted arbitrarily against high officials of the Venezuelan state. Canada has been participating in the so-called Lima Group meetings and is trying to increase its presence in Latin America. And the Cuban president has strongly rejected the Lima Group's stance on Venezuela. Via social media, Miguel Díaz-Canel said that the group is under U.S. influence and rejected its attacks against the Venezuelan government. The president also said that Cuba will answer with dignity to the group's attacks. The U.S. Secretary of State visited the Colombia-Venezuela border over the weekend as social movements and the Bolivarian militias gathered to reject his presence.
Bolivarian militias gathered in the three border bridges of Urania, Tienditas and Simón Bolívar to defend their country, as they did on February 23rd when the opposition and their international allies tried to force alleged humanitarian aid into the country.
We had said that there was no food or medicine in those trucks. Instead, there was war equipment. Everyone saw what happened. Who is going to take responsibility? Donald Trump? Do you think someone can do that to another country? Does the US want that to happen at their border? The US is attacking people who want to cross their border. They want to build a wall to keep people out. But they want us to open our border so that they can come in. They think that we are their backyard.
Everything was normal at the Simón Bolívar Bridge before U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrived. While they wanted to transform the bridge into a symbol of an alleged humanitarian crisis, the reality is that there is simply economic migration. It's usual to see people crossing into Colombia in the morning and then returning to Venezuela at night. When Pompeo arrived at the border bridge, he said that President Nicolás Maduro should have opened the border to allow the entrance of the so-called humanitarian aid. But Venezuelan authorities report that his visit is part of an electoral strategy for the 2020 elections in the United States.
There are upcoming elections in the US and in Colombia, so they are going around all Latin America using Venezuela as a strategy for their political gain.
While Pompeo was in Cucuta, in the other side of the bridge, Venezuelan people protested his presence.
We have always respected all governments, and we respect the U.S. government. But we ask to get the same respect because international law protects the self-determination of people. We don't agree with the U.S. system, but we respect it. And what we ask from the world is that they respect our socialist system.
Recently, journalist Max Blumenthal revealed that on the 10th of April, a group of U.S., Colombian and Brazilian officials who coordinate U.S. propaganda in the region met to discuss war against Venezuela. The Venezuelan Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, also reported that a plan is being prepared to start a military intervention in the country, a plan backed by the U.S., and that could become a crime against humanity.
The spokesperson for China's foreign ministry has once again called out U.S. officials for their slanderous comments regarding Latin America-China relations. During a news conference on Monday, Lu Kang said Latin American countries will come to the right conclusion about who their true allies are.
Facts have proved that China has brought opportunities to Latin American countries. We also noticed some of the false accusations from the U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo in Venezuela against China. I want to mention that China's position on the Venezuelan issue is clear and consistent. We stand firmly for the orders and principles of the UN Charter to maintain regional peace and stability. For a long time, the United States has regarded Latin America as its own backyard and pressured, threatened, and even toppled other countries' political regimes. Justice is in people's heart. Who is a true friend? Who is a fake friend? Who ignores the rules and spreads chaos? We believe Latin American countries will make a right decision.
The first Red Cross's flight carrying 24 tons of medicine, as well as power generators, has arrived in Venezuela. Authorities formally asked for this aid last week, mainly to restock supplies in hospitals. The Venezuelan Minister of Health has said the arrival of this aid is another way to try and overcome the economic blockade imposed by the U.S. government and its allies.
I'd like to inform everyone that the first shipment of humanitarian aid from the Red Cross is arriving. It is made up of medical supplies, electrical generators and medicine that will be distributed in different hospitals in the country, just as the president of our international federation, Dr. Francesco Roca, stated on March 29. We are grateful to all state and private institutions who made the access of this aid possible.
Brazil said it will quit the Union of South American Nations, or UNASUR. The announcement came just hours after it received the pro tempore presidency of the organization. The presidency will now pass to Chile, a country that leads attempts at dismantling the bloc and creating a new one, ProSur, made up by right-wing governments in the region. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo has more on the decision.
On the morning of April 16th, far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro announced that Brazil will be pulling out of UNASUR. UNASUR is the coalition of 12 South American states that was created in 2008 by Hugo Chavez and Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to establish a kind of counter-hegemonic force to U.S. imperialism in the region. It manifests in the Monroe Doctrine, which causes Americans to believe that they have the right to intervene in any country in Latin America, as we can see now with what's going on in Venezuela. So why would Brazil pull out of this? Why would the president, who promised that he would place the interests of Brazil above all others during his campaign, pull out of such an important space? Well, according to former Foreign Affairs Minister and Defense Minister Celso Amorim, this move by the Bolsonaro government is just one more sign of total submission to U.S. interests in the region. Brazil is no longer acting as an independent state with self-determination and sovereignty. It's now a proxy state of the United States government, and we can see this in its relationship with Venezuela.
We thank Brian Muir for that report. A group of Colombians marched to protest against the killing of a 7-month-old baby on Monday. The baby was killed in an attack against his father, a former FARC member. Both parents survived but are still recovering from their injuries. And the FARC political party is demanding an investigation into the baby's death.
The Reincorporation Agency for the Former Combatants of the Armed Conflict says 46% of the murder cases involving ex-members have been solved. Meanwhile, 51 people have been arrested in connection with the crimes.
The authorities are currently investigating the murder of 128 former combatants.
The most recent attack on a former combatant occurred in the department of Guajira over the weekend. While the man remains hospitalized in a critical condition, his 7-month-old child has died.
We hadn't previously received threats in Guaira, unlike other departments like the Valle del Cauca. This shows that paramilitaries are active all across the country. In the same way, we must also be active all across Colombia, and we need to find out who was behind this vile attack.
The UN Security Council recently drew attention to the Colombian government's continued failure to provide guarantees for former combatants.
The visibility of police and air force in many areas is crucial, as building competition between armed groups near security forces is putting many in grave danger and endangering peace across Colombia.
According to experts, 76% of former FARC combatants remain hopeful that they can be reintegrated in society. But they demand guarantees from the government to safeguard their lives and well-being.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Anne-Marie Vaz has been sworn in as Member of Parliament for Jamaica's Portland Eastern constituency. Her swearing-in comes nearly 2 weeks after she defeated the opposition candidate in the April 4th by-election. Vaz will now be the 17th woman in the current Parliament and the second to sit with her husband at the same time. She was warmly congratulated by her spouse, Portland Eastern MP Daryl Vaz, after taking the oath.
I, Anne-Marie Theresa Vaz, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Jamaica, that I will uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of Jamaica, and that I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of Jamaica. So help me God.
The Caribbean Court of Justice says it is well equipped to dispense justice in the region. And to speak on its behalf, the 14-year-old tribunal called on a senator, a lecturer, and a lineup of respected jurists for a media open day to be broadcasted live on Sunday. Barbados, Guyana, Belize, and Dominica have already signed up to the CCJ jurisdiction. Barbadians will now have to wait even longer to use drones. That's because the temporary suspension on the importation and licensing of remotely piloted aircraft has been extended for another 12 months. The ban has been in place since March 2016. The government is now working on a new legislation to regulate the use of drones and to integrate them into the national airspace system. University lecturers in Argentina are protesting against the lack of job opportunities and budget cuts as a result of the government's austerity policies. They're also demanding an increase in salaries.
Scientists and researchers objected against the austerity measures pushed by Mauricio Macri's government. The members of the National Federation of University Teachers were supported by several other unions.
Salaries are low and subsidies are not enough. There is no budget for equipment and for the operation of our institutions. There has also been a decrease in job openings at the National Council for Scientific Investigation.
Demonstrators also rejected the cuts to scholarship programs and the lack of job opportunities in fields of science. Only 17% of those who applied were able to get a position or a scholarship, leaving thousands of others without an option.
This year has gotten worse. More than 80% of the scientists who applied for jobs were left out despite their years of preparation.
Protesters further noted that the budget cuts are damaging the quality and amount of research conducted.
These cuts are affecting our capacity to publish findings. This is why we have been protesting since April 4th, along with other unions. We stand in solidarity against the austerity measures pushed by the government.
The science sector has seen its budget decrease over the last few years. Its members are demanding better salaries and more vacancies for students in this field.
At least 6 people have been killed in a plane crash in Chile. The plane reportedly went down shortly after taking off, crashing on several houses in a residential area and setting them on fire. All 5 passengers and 1 crew member were killed in the accident. Firefighters mobilized to the area to control the fire. New York's Natural History Museum has canceled a private event that would have honored Brazilian far-right President Jair Bolsonaro following international outrage. The museum received an avalanche of comments and complaints regarding the Brazilian president's policies, which critics say threaten the environment as well as indigenous communities. The event was booked by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, which had chosen President Bolsonaro to receive their Person of the Year award. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has launched a transparency program. Now people will be able to know how public money is used.
Mexicans are demanding to know where is public money going. From today, people will be able to know how much public officials working for the federal government earn.
We pay taxes. With that, we contribute to the economic development of the country. We have the right to know because we are the contributors. We pay their salaries.
There are things that are not clear. For that, it's necessary we can access a database that can tell us how much public officials earn. Myself as a citizen can now have access to this information.
The Public Secretariat launched the website Transparent Payroll, a platform where people can find the net worth of 1.4 million public officials working at 290 government offices.
What we did is a historic fact to make public 100% of the assets declaration of the state secretaries, sub-secretaries, and the extended cabinet, the 32 state delegates, and we are working on the logic of transparency.
The platform also allows people to learn about the wages of 2 million teachers and 17,000 public officials working for social programs promoted by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
We didn't have a payroll government. There wasn't a way people could know how much their public officials are earning. This is a step forward.
Following this transparency effort, the Energy Ministry released the list of the most expensive gas stations. Its owners say their prices need to remain the same and will not lower them.
I am calling on the biggest distributors to help us with this. I'm sure that they will do it so we can have fair prices.
The government has promised not to increase the fuel prices.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The African Union has issued an ultimatum to the military council in Sudan, demanding enhanced power over 2 civilians. A member of Sudan's Transitional Military Council met Ethiopia's Prime Minister in Addis Ababa, where the African Union is based. He said the process of choosing a prime minister for a civilian government is already underway. In a communiqué issued on Monday, the African Union's Peace and Security Council called for Sudan's military to transfer power to a transitional civilian-led political authority within 15 days or face suspension from the Union. Meanwhile, protesters have received medical treatment and food in makeshift clinics. Volunteers and doctors are treating injured protesters that have clashed with security forces outside the army complex. The protesters have vowed to continue camping outside the complex, demanding for a civilian rule.
I am very happy to be helping my Sudanese brothers at a time like this where all of us are equal, and thank God that we are all working together and are united hand in hand to overthrow this oppressive regime.
All the doctors here, they volunteers to help the people of the Sudan. They come from different areas of the Sudan, from the east, from the north. All of them, they are here. They have one goal: to help the revolution and to help the people of the Sudan.
The Algerian Constitutional Council chairman has resigned after weeks of protest. Tayyip Belais was in charge of the process to draw up a new constitution, key in the transition after the resignation of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. Protesters are still on the streets calling on the entire interim government to step down. And thousands of students vowed to keep their protests despite a warning from the head of the military to cease protest actions. The students are demanding the immediate resignation of officials they accuse of being too close to Bouteflika. But the head of the military asked the protesters to leave the streets and show patience during the transition.
To the elite society, we want to say out. No to Bedoui, no to Belay, no to Ben Salah, and no to Boukareb, no to the 4 Bs, and no to the regime symbols.
Egypt's parliament has approved the extension of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's rule. The constitutional change will allow the president to stay in power until 2030. And the parliament is also expected to give the president more influence over the judiciary with the ability to appoint judges. The Center for Environmental Rights has revealed that activists who oppose mining projects in South Africa are often harassed, threatened, and sometimes killed. The human rights organization says this creates an atmosphere of fear for community members who mobilize to raise concerns about the damage that mining companies cause to their communities. It also accused the government of being complicit in the attacks.
The charge was public violence.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.